The Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein. Welcome to the Daily Derech, a special project of exploring Judaism at the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism and the Rabbinical Assembly. Today is the first day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 25th of Nisan, 5786, corresponding in the secular calendar to Sunday, April 12, 2026. We will read Parashat Tazria Metzora this coming Shabbat, and it is the 10th day of the Omer. Let's begin. Me'am Loez. We'll start a new Parsha today, Parashat Tazria Metzora. We're switching from Parashat Shmini, which we were in previously. At the end of Parashat Shmini, the really big part is talking mostly about the kashrut and the purity of animals. It's where we actually get a lot of our laws about what animals are considered kosher and what are not. And we seem to get this sort of strange transition into the laws of human purity. And we don't usually think of them in the same category because, well, we don't eat humans, thank God. And but it's important to understand that Judaism really thinks of kashrut in the same category as purity and impurity. So a lot of the reasons why we can't eat certain animals or certain kinds is because they are considered impure by the Torah. And so therefore, actually in the order of the Torah, it makes a lot of sense to begin talking about Tazria Metzora, because the main thing that is talked about in Tazria Metzora is bodily impurity, whether that comes from giving birth, or it comes from menstruation, or it comes from the biblical disease of Metzora. Whatever it may be, it is considered bodily impurity of some sort. And that's why it's connected in the Torah between animal impurity to human impurity. But immediately once I'm saying this, it feels kind of strange. Why should animal impurity come before human impurity? Aren't humans somehow higher or better than animals are? And this is important in Judaism. Judaism definitely makes a very big differentiation between animal life and human life. It's not that animal life is not considered important. We have many important values that take care of animals, like the value of tsar b'alei chayim, to make sure animals don't suffer. But that's on a completely different level than human suffering. Because humans are taken to be a certain level of holiness. They're made in the image of God, etc., etc. So I think that pushes the question even more. Why is it after the laws of human purity, after the laws of animal purity? Well, interestingly enough, we actually have the same understanding, the same order from the creation story itself. You would expect in some ways humans to be created first, the most important thing. If humans really are the pinnacle of creation, shouldn't they be created in the beginning? And actually, no. It seems that actually they're one of the last things that are created in creation, right? Adam and Eve are created on the sixth day of creation, while there's already living things all the way from the fifth day. And if you count off obviously plants and everything like that, the fourth day before that. So we already actually see this during creation, and many authorities actually, and of course the Me'am Loez talks about this idea that the reason being so is that animals are actually more pure, they're more holy than human beings if human beings don't apply their intellect, if human beings don't think and don't actually work on themselves. Right? If they don't actually use their moral compass and they actually don't purify themselves, work on themselves to be better human beings, actually use their intellect and wisdom to become better people, then actually they are a lower rung of creation than animals. And I think this is deeply beautiful, because I think when you say that human beings are made in the image of God, it seems like at the outset, the human being is just holier, or better than everything else, or sort of connected to God right from the outset. But what this does in such a beautiful way is it changes that to a meritocracy, right? Human beings are not any holier than animals. Actually, they're less holy than animals unless they purify themselves, unless they work on themselves. And if they work on themselves, then they truly can become made in the image of God. If they actually are good people and use their wisdom, use their intellect to become better people, they use what makes them uniquely divine, and then they become the holy human being. But at their outset, right at their creation, even though the dream is that they're made, that they become the image of God, that is a becoming. That doesn't start that way. And I think that's a really important way to put human beings in our place. There is a reason why we're considered holy. There's a reason why we're considered the pinnacle of creation, but that's only when we use our brains. That's only when we use our mind and our wisdom to actually become better people. If we don't do that, actually animals are better than us. And I think it's really important to bring that in and maybe take us off our human high horse that we often sit on. We'll continue talking about this the rest of the week. Mishnah Torah. Okay, we'll continue with the laws of counting the Omer today, and this will actually be our final day of discussing these laws. There's not that much, but it is important to understand the halacha behind it. We spoke in our previous episode, really interesting in talking about the theoretical mitzvah itself, of sort of what it actually looked like of the first Omer offering in the temple and how it was actually envisioned and what it's supposed to mean, because I really don't think we can understand the mitzvah unless we talk about that. But none of that is halacha l'maaseh today, meaning none of it's practical halacha in our lives today. So today we're going to actually talk about the practical halacha of counting the Omer. So number one, it's obviously a mitzvah to count the Omer, as the Torah says that you should count them after the Sabbath, meaning after the first day of Pesach, and you should count 50 days. And we do this traditionally at night. The reason is because they're supposed to be complete days, and the Jewish day begins at night, and you should begin, therefore, counting at the beginning of the complete day, which would be at night. And that's really the reason why we're supposed to be saying counting at night. Now, this is only ideal to count at night. And when I mean counting at night, I mean fully halachically night, meaning 3 stars are out in the sky, it is fully dark outside. And in that case, you can do that's the ideal way to do the mitzvah. But it's important to understand that you could still count the next day. It's fine. It's just not ideal. Very, very important. So this is the works. And the exact script is written out in many Sidurim. And the reason why you can't just say today is the first day, today's the second day, today is the 8th day, today's 9th day, something like that, is because the rabbis were actually unsure of whether you're supposed to count days or you're counting weeks or both. And so what do? You count both. So you not only count the amount of days, but you also count the amount of weeks. And that's why we have the script in many Sidurim and prayer books in order to get that right, because it can be much more complicated once you head in the weeks and everything like that. That's why the really long language. But if you make a grammar mistake, in the counting, it's really okay. It's not the biggest deal as long as you're counting both days and weeks. That's really what is important. Importantly, what about this comes up all the time, right? What about standing, right? There's a tradition to stand when you count the Omer. And in terms of a lot of positive mitzvot, we stand when we do them, but it's not completely, not for all positive mitzvot. So that's not really a complete reason just because it's a positive mitzvah in the Torah. The reason actually in the Midrash, in the halachic Midrash and in the Gemara, that it states that one should stand during this mitzvah because remember that the Omer needs to be taken from standing grain, and standing grain means grain that's still attached to the ground, right? You can't take the Omer from something that's already been harvested, right? It has to be harvested for that purpose. And the expression in Hebrew is standing grain, and so therefore we stand to remember the standing grain that needs to be taken. So that's actually the reason why we stand. But very similar to the other thing we talked about the night, again, if you don't do that and you don't stand during it, it still counts, right? It's okay. And so especially if you have a medical issue where standing would be an issue, it's okay. But if you even just do it on mistake and you forget to stand, or let's say you're tired at night, you're sleeping in your bed or something like that, you don't want to get up, or it's during TV, you don't need to stand up you don't necessarily need to stand up immediately. Ideally, that's wonderful. But if you don't, it's okay. It really is very, very important. Now, this is obviously traditionally incumbent upon only males because it is a positive time-bound commandment. But in the conservative movement, we also say that women should do this as well. Very, very important. So I obviously believe that both men and women should do this, but important thing to point out that this is a change from the general tradition. Lastly, it's important to say a bracha before doing this mitzvah. The bracha before the mitzvah is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Asher Kitshanu B'Tzotav V'Tzivanu Al Sfirat HaOmer. right? And so, blessed are you, our Lord, who sanctifies with his commandments, commanding us to count the Omer, and then you count, right? Always we do the mitzvah before the action of the mitzvah itself. The bracha always becomes before the mitzvah. So very, very important. And lastly, I think the last thing I want to discuss in the very little time we have left with this particular segment is that there is this idea, and many people know this, God forbid you forget one day of the Omer and you can no longer count with the bracha anymore, right? So this is the general halacha. If you look up the halacha, you'll find that this is the general opinion, and this is sort of the way Psak has come down, and it makes sense, and it really comes from the original idea, actually from a particular rabbinic Rishon called the Bahag, who said that the mitzvah itself is the entire counting of 50. So if you leave one of the countings out, then you don't have the whole entire unit, and you maybe are not actually even fulfilling the mitzvah in the first place. Well, thank God most of the major authorities did not go with the Bahag, because that is like, man, that's scary. But in honor of the Bahag, we do actually traditionally continue counting, but we don't say the bracha after you forget one day, because sfeik brachot lahakel, right? Because of a general rule that if there is a doubt of whether you're doing a mitzvah or not, we don't say the bracha. Now, this is the general ruling, so really importantly, it's not like you failed because you missed one day. It is 100% a mitzvah to continue counting. There's one authority who says maybe it's not the mitzvah anymore, okay? But every major authority still says the mitzvah, so definitely still counting. But even just to say a bracha, okay, it would make sense to say sveik brachot lahakel in this case, and okay, maybe not to say the bracha. But I want to make sure to say this, there actually is a good argument if you really are going by the Rambam, which we are here and we're learning from the Mishnah Torah, to say that actually the Rambam says nothing about that you're breaking the mitzvah by not by missing a day. It actually says nothing about missing a day at all. And so maybe by absent, we can at least understand that the Rambam didn't even think this was a problem. So at least in the world of the Rambam, he at least might argue and say, certainly you can say a bracha. But of course, I wouldn't recommend this because this is not the way the halacha has come down. But I'm saying this all, just don't feel so much guilt just because you forget one day. That's not productive, and I think it encourages people to feel bad. No reason to feel bad. Just try to do the mitzvah as best you can. We'll now continue with Menorat HaMaor. We are going to continue on with the introduction for the Sefer. We started it yesterday, but if you didn't listen to yesterday, it's okay. This is a new teaching for today. So the introduction actually continues with this beautiful idea, and we actually, in the Gemara in Eruvin, 54b, we actually have how the oral Torah was given over to Moses, Aaron, his children, the elders, and the Jewish people. This is a very interesting segment here. So, number one, what is the oral Torah? So in Judaism, a core belief of Judaism, and especially Rabbinic Judaism, is that not only the written Torah was given to Moses at Mount Sinai, but so too was an oral Torah. This oral Torah really was all the details, all of the precise details, and what's eventually recorded in the rabbinic discussion of the Talmud. It was actually given to Moses right from the outset, but except that it wasn't written down, and it was passed on from generation to generation to generation until the rabbis wrote it down, starting with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi in 200 CE. Redacted the Mishnah. So this is the traditional understanding of the origin of the Talmud and the Mishnah and the oral Torah of Judaism. So here it's really interesting how the Eruvin, how the Talmud actually narrates to us how this was actually given over to the Jewish people and how it was actually taught. And so according to Eruvin 54b, what happened was, of course, God gave it over to Moses. Then Moses would invite Aaron in. Moses would then teach Aaron all of the oral Torah. Then Aaron would stay, he would move over, and his sons would then come in. And then he would teach his sons, but Aaron would still be there, right? And this is very important. And then what would then happen is the sons would stay, and actually the elders then came in, the tribal chieftains or the elders would come in, and Moses would teach them a third time. And then finally, Moses teaches the entire people, and still the elders, Aaron and the children, and the elders are still also listening to it a fourth time. This is, incredible. So that happens. And not only that, it doesn't only end with that, because the people still only hear it one time, even though Moses has now taught it 4 times. So now what ends up happening is Moses leaves and Aaron then has to teach it. And Aaron teaches it to all those people again. Then Aaron leaves. Then his children teach the same Torah again, the oral Torah again, to all the people. And then finally the elders teach it all again to the people again, right? So that everybody hears it at least 4 times. And this is actually how, supposedly, according to the Talmud, that the oral Torah was given to the Jewish people. Very, very interesting. Now, of course, the answer is why? What is this supposed to teach us? Well, I think that we don't give enough credit in Torah, and it's not a part of our lives enough, the idea of repetition in Torah. Torah, in order to understand Torah, in order to understand Jewish law and anything in Torah, requires real repetition. And oftentimes we crave wanting to learn something new. We want that high from learning something new, from gaining new information or new insight or something like that. But actually, our rabbis tell us that you actually learn a lot more by repeating what you've already learned, so that it gets further and more deeply imprinted within yourself. And not only that, I think in this case, also as a teacher, to teach it multiple times, which is also, that's the best way to learn, is by teaching something. You really learn it very, very clearly. So learning and repeating is a super important part of Torah. It's actually one of the reasons why Mishnah itself comes from the Hebrew word lishanot, or to repeat, because it is essential in Jewish oral, especially in oral Torah, and something that's not going to be written down, right? Even though we now do have it written down, for it to be repeated over and over again, because something's different. Once you memorize something, or once you really understand it and can repeat it back from within, rather than reading it on a piece of paper, you understand the topic differently. As now scientists, psychologists have now shown us that this actually improves retention, memorization, and in this way, even though we've taken that out of schools in so many years, they used to really be like the heart of Jewish education, was memorizing passages and memorizing Torah, memorizing oral Torah. So I'm not saying go home, memorize everything, but what I am telling you is that repetition is really, really important to understanding Torah. And you're going to actually see this in Menorat HaMaor. I think this is why this appears in the introduction, that you'll hear things repeated in the Menorat HaMaor. He's not just trying to give you a unique point every single time, but he's trying to bring home the central messages of Judaism, the central values of what Judaism stands for. And he wants it to be imprinted upon your heart, which is why there may very well be repetition in the Sefer, which is important. Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that. And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions, and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.